The train screeched like a wounded animal as it pulled into the lonely town, its black smoke curling against the pale sky, and from one of the weather-beaten coaches stepped a young woman named Anna, her hands trembling as they clutched a battered suitcase, her heart carrying more weight than the luggage itself, because she was not just a traveler. She was a mail-order bride who had traded her past, her dignity, and her last few coins for a promise written in a stranger's letters. Those letters had told her she was wanted, that she could start a new life far away from the streets where people mocked her for being alone. And she had believed them. So now she stood on the cracked wooden platform in a faded beige dress. Her bonnet pulled low over her brow, her shoes scuffed from the miles she had walked before even boarding the train. And she felt the weight of the town's stares as if every pair of eyes was a nail pressing into her skin. For the men leaning against the posts with tobacco stains on their lips spat into the dust and smirked. The women gathered near the general. Store whispered sharp words behind gloved hands, and even the children clinging to their mother's skirts looked at her as though she were some creature dragged in by the wind. And yet the man who was supposed to meet her, the man who had written, his name carefully on each letter, was nowhere to be seen. No hat raised in greeting, no hand extended to guide her down from the platform, nothing but the dry wind scattering dust around her ankles. And when she dared to ask a broad-shouldered ranch hand if he knew where her groom might be, his laughter cut through the silence, cruel and loud, making others turn to look, and he spat into the dirt before saying, "Ain't no man here fool enough to claim you." And the others chuckled like jackals circling something wounded, and her face burned with humiliation, but her spine stiffened because she had come too far to collapse now. Yet when she tried to step forward with her suitcase, another man muttered under his breath, but loud enough for her to hear, "She don't even know she's already marked." And the words chilled her to the bone, though she forced herself to keep moving, each step heavy with the fear that she had not come to find a new life, but to walk straight into something much darker. For the silence that followed her down the street was too thick, too knowing, as if the townsfolk were hiding secrets they dared not speak aloud. And though she wanted to cry, to shout, to demand why she had been brought here only to be shamed, her pride chained her tongue, so she walked on, suitcase dragging, her eyes scanning the faces of men who studied her like property and women who studied her like threat, until the air itself seemed to thicken with dread, pressing on her lungs, and then, just as her knees threatened to give way, she felt the sudden tug on her skirt and spun around, bracing herself for another cruel remark, but instead saw a little girl, no older than 6, clutching a ragged doll to her chest. Her pale face half hidden under a mop of tangled hair, her eyes wide not with mockery, but with something between terror and desperate hope. And before Anna could ask who she was or why she had stopped her, the child whispered in a voice so thin it was almost lost to the wind, "Can you be my mommy? And the entire street froze. The laughter died. The whispers cut off. The men looked away. The women tightened their arms around their children, and Anna's breath caught in her throat because she did not understand why such a small question carried such heavy fear, nor why the townsfolk suddenly avoided her gaze as though she had been touched by a curse. But she knew in her bones that this was no ordinary child, and that one innocent whisper had bound her to a mystery that would not let her walk away alive. Anna stared down at the little girl who had stopped her, the words, "Can you be my mommy?" echoing in her mind like church bells in a ghost town, and though the child's voice had been small, it had struck her heart with the weight of a thunderclap. Because it was not the request of a playful child. It was the desperate plea of someone cornered, someone who had seen too much darkness for her tiny years. And as Anna bent slightly to meet the girl's frightened eyes, she noticed the bruise on her wrist where small fingers clutched the ragged doll too tightly. She noticed the dirt streaked across her cheeks as if she had been running, hiding, crying, and then, before Anna could form a single question, The girl tugged her skirt again and whispered, this time even softer, "Please." "Before they take me back?" And Anna's stomach knotted in terror, though she did not yet know why. But she became painfully aware that every eye in town was watching, not with open mockery now, but with tense, silent dread, as if waiting for her answer would unlock something terrible. And she looked around at the faces, at the men whose grins had soured into stone, at the women whose whispers had died, but whose eyes brimmed with warnings they dared not voice, at the sheriff standing near the saloon door whose hand twitched, close to his belt, yet who refused to meet her gaze. And she realized that this child's simple question was forbidden in this town, that the people around her would rather choke on their own tongues than explain what shadow loomed over the girl. And yet Anna's own voice, shaky though it was, came out before she could stop it. "Yes, sweetheart, I'll help you." And the child's grip tightened on her skirt with a strength that shocked her, like a drowning soul clinging to driftwood. And in that instant, Anna knew she had stepped across an invisible line. Because the air itself seemed to shift, the onlookers exchanged sharp glances, and somewhere a dog began to bark as if it sensed what the humans refused to admit. And then from behind the saloon came the sound of boots, heavy boots that struck, the ground in perfect rhythm, and the crowd parted without a word, like wheat bending in the wind, and out stepped three men dressed in black dusters, their faces shadowed under wide-brimmed hats, their boots polished but their spurs clinking, like rattlesnakes, and the little girl whimpered and pressed herself against Anna's leg, whispering, "Don't let them take me." And Anna's mouth went dry because she did not know these men. Yet the entire town acted as though their arrival was the end of the story, as though whatever happened next had already been written. And the tallest of the three men stopped in front of Anna, his cold eyes scanning her face before settling on the child, and in a voice smooth but carrying venom he said, "That one doesn't belong to you, miss. She belongs to us." And the way he said it made Anna's blood run cold, because children did not belong to anyone. Yet the way the crowd kept their heads bowed, refusing to intervene, told her that in this cursed town, the rules were different, cruel, and carved into fear itself. And when Anna tried to step back, clutching the girl's small hand, the man's shadow fell over them both. And though her heart pounded and every instinct told her to run, she forced herself to stand tall and say, "She asked me for help, and I won't hand her over." And her voice trembled but carried farther than she expected, echoing against the silent buildings. And in that moment Anna understood she had made enemies she could not yet see, and allies she did not yet know, because the mystery of why a child was treated like property, why the town had whispered about her being already marked, and why the man she was supposed to marry had vanished without a trace. All of it was bound together, and Anna had walked straight into a web that would not let her go without blood, without truth, without the kind of choices that shatter a soul. And as the men in black reached for their guns and the little girl sobbed into her skirt, Anna whispered a prayer she had not spoken in years, for she knew the next few minutes would decide not only her fate, but the fate of a child who had chosen her with 6 fragile words. "Can you be my mommy?" Anna's breath came in shallow bursts as the 3 men in black closed the space around her, their boots scraping dust across the wooden planks of the station yard, their silence heavier than thunder before a storm, and she felt the child trembling against her leg, the girl's tiny fingers digging into the fabric of her skirt like hooks of desperation, while every onlooker kept their heads bowed as if watching this moment would curse them. But before the men could reach for the child again, the air shifted with the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps approaching from behind, a rhythm steady, calm, almost too calm. And as Anna turned her head, she saw him, the stranger, broad-shouldered beneath a worn military coat, his face shadowed by the brim of a weather-beaten hat, his boots coated with dust that spoke of long, Miles traveled, and though he carried no weapon in hand, something about the way he walked, the way his eyes scanned the scene with quiet intensity, made the crowd instinctively step back, giving him room as if they knew what he was capable of. And he stopped just a few feet away from Anna, his gaze locking first on the men in black, then on the child clutching Anna's skirt, and finally on Anna herself, before he spoke in a low voice that carried like a rifle shot through the silence. "If you hand her over, she won't live the week. And if you keep her, they'll come for you both before nightfall." And the words coiled into Anna's mind like serpents, leaving her both frozen and burning with questions she dared not ask. Yet the calm certainty in his tone made her believe. He spoke truth, not threat. And the leader of the men in black sneered at the stranger, spitting into the dirt before saying, "This ain't your concern, soldier. Crawl back into whatever hole you came from." But the stranger didn't flinch, his jaw tightening only slightly as he said, "I've buried too many little ones to stand by while you brand another." And that one word, brand, slammed into Anna's ears, her memory flashing back to the whispered gossip she had half heard on the train, about how this town carried scars, about how children were marked, and she finally understood the terror in the little girl's plea, because whatever had been done to her was carved not only into flesh, but into the very bones of fear, and Anna's stomach twisted as she recalled the faint raised mark she had glimpsed on the child's wrist earlier, hidden beneath dirt and bruises. A mark not natural but deliberate, cruel, a symbol of ownership, of possession. And now it made sense why the men in black called the girl theirs, why the town dared not interfere. Why every whisper had died when Anna said she would protect the child, because she had unknowingly stepped into a war against a power that ruled by terror. And the stranger, with his cold, battle-worn eyes, seemed to know the full weight of what she had done, though he didn't tell her to step back, didn't tell her to let go, only gave her that warning which felt less like a choice and more like a prophecy. And Anna realized in that moment that whatever path she took, she had already been claimed by the danger, and there would be no returning to the quiet, invisible life she had once believed awaited her as a mail-order bride. Because now, by the side of a child who had whispered 6 words that bound her fate, she had crossed into the territory of secrets, of blood, of fire. And the stranger's warning was not meant to scare her away, but to prepare her. For something darker than she could yet imagine was already moving in the shadows, closing in with every breath she took. And as the sun dipped lower behind the jagged horizon, painting the town in crimson light, Anna knew the night ahead would not bring rest, but reckoning. The town seemed to change the moment the sun slipped behind the hills, as if daylight had been a fragile mask torn away to reveal the true face of the place, and Anna felt it in her bones, a heaviness in the air that pressed against her chest, making each breath uneasy. And though the stranger had told her nothing more than his warning, the look in his eyes had been enough to tell her that the real danger did not walk the streets by day, but moved like smoke through alleys and shadows at night. And so, clutching the girl close, Anna found herself taken to an abandoned barn on the edge of town, guided silently by the soldier whose name she still did not know, his every step cautious, every glance thrown over his shoulder sharp as a blade, as if he knew eyes were watching from places Anna could not see. And when they finally reached the safety of the barn, the soldier pulled the heavy wooden door shut, and only then allowed himself to speak, his voice a whisper almost drowned by the rustling of hay. "This town is not what it seems, and neither are the men who hunt her. They serve someone darker." And his words made Anna's heart pound, because she had already guessed as much, but hearing it confirmed sent shivers up her spine. And when she asked him who they were, he only said, "They brand children so they can never escape. It marks them for life, as property, as a warning, as a curse, and the ones who carry the mark are haunted until they die." And with that, Anna looked down at the girl who sat quietly in her lap, her wide eyes too knowing for her small face, And she realized the child had not cried once since the stranger appeared, as if she trusted him, as if she had seen soldiers before and knew some still carried mercy. And though Anna wanted to ask 100 questions, the soldier silenced her with a raised hand, his eyes narrowing at the sound of footsteps outside, and Anna's breath froze in her chest as she held the girl tighter, listening to the crunch of gravel, the scrape of boots dragging slowly past the barn door, and a voice, low, mocking, murmured words she could barely make out. She belongs to the fire now. You can't hide her forever. And then silence, thick and suffocating, followed by the retreat of footsteps fading into the distance. Yet Anna knew they had not gone far, that the night itself was crawling with enemies who waited for her to make one mistake. And when she turned back to the soldier, she saw his hand resting near the knife at his belt, his body tense, every muscle ready to strike if the door splintered open. And though he remained calm on the surface, Anna could see the battle scars in his eyes, the weight of wars fought not only with guns but with nightmares, and she wondered what had broken him, what had brought him here, and why he chose to stand between her and the darkness. But she could not ask, because the barn suddenly shuddered with a low moan of wind, and from the rafters above came the echo of something moving, not an animal, not the creak of wood, but something deliberate, crawling, watching. And Anna realized then that the danger was not only outside but already inside, that the shadows had crept in with them, waiting for the right moment to strike, and though she wanted to scream, the soldier's hand found hers in the dark, squeezing it with a strength that steadied her, and he whispered just 4 words that made her blood run cold. They know we're here. And with that, the night stretched long and merciless, a battlefield of silence, fear, and secrets yet to be revealed. And Anna understood that whatever this child carried branded into her flesh was not just a mark, but a key to a horror much larger than she could comprehend, a horror that would either consume them before dawn, or finally be brought to light in blood and fire. The night bled into a silence so heavy that even the wind seemed afraid to move, and Anna clutched the little girl tighter, her heartbeat echoing like a drum in her chest as the stranger's shadow loomed near the broken barn where they had taken refuge. His words from the night before still burning in her ears. If you want to live, don't trust the town, don't trust the walls, trust only the shadows, for the truth walks there. And she could feel every nerve in her body scream for answers that refused to come, because behind those dead eyes of the stranger lived a fire of secrets, and tonight, when dawn threatened to rise, those secrets would decide whether she and the child lived or perished in the dust of a cursed land. Outside, the townsfolk gathered, their torches glowing like a chain of fire snakes slithering across the earth, their chants low, angry, ritualistic, and the little girl trembled, whispering through dry lips, "Mommy, are they coming for us?" And the word mommy stabbed Anna deeper than any knife, because she was not her mother. She was nothing but a forgotten bride no one had wanted. Yet this child clung to her as though her soul had found home, and so Anna swallowed the lump in her throat, stroked the child's hair, and whispered, "I won't let them take you," though her heart doubted every syllable, for she had seen the brand beneath the girl's dress. The cruel mark of ownership burned into her flesh, a symbol, older than the town, older than any law, and she knew now why they wanted her back, because the child was not just a little girl. She was the key to a bargain written in blood long ago, a bargain the townsfolk were desperate to keep, and if Anna stood in the way, she would be ground to dust. The stranger moved closer, his coat dragging across the dirt, his face half hidden. His voice low and sharp as a blade, "They'll come before sunrise! And when they do, you must choose. Give her to them, or burn with her." And Anna's body froze, for in that moment the child clung tighter and whispered with such innocent trust, "Please don't leave me." And Anna knew the choice had already been made, though she had no strength, no weapons, no plan, only the stubborn flame that whispered within her. The flame that said she was no longer unwanted, no longer nameless, because someone, a child with tear-soaked eyes, had claimed her. And that made her dangerous to the cruel order that had kept the town silent for generations. Outside, the chanting grew louder, the torches brighter, and in that rising storm of voices, Anna felt the shadows themselves move, crawling across the barn walls, thick and alive, as though listening, waiting. And when she dared look back at the stranger, she finally saw what had been hidden. His own neck bore a brand, the same cruel mark as the girl's, but burned over, scarred, defied, and in his eyes, for the first time, she did not see warning, but war. The barn's old wood creaked under the weight of silence, every crack sounding like a gunshot in Anna's ears as she tried to steady her breathing, and the child's small fingers dug into her sleeve as if holding on to the last thread of hope. While outside, the mob's chanting twisted into something darker, almost inhuman, like voices borrowed from the grave, and Anna felt the hair rise on the back of her neck, because this was no ordinary gathering. It was a ritual, and the girl was its center. The stranger's eyes locked with hers, burning with an urgency that made her heart pound harder. "Do you understand now?" he hissed, his voice a blade slicing through the heavy air. "This child was never meant to live free. They marked her before she could speak. They carved her fate into her flesh. She is their promise, their sacrifice, and you've become the thief who stole her from the altar." And Anna's throat went dry, her mind screaming to run, yet her legs refusing to move, because she remembered the first time she had seen the girl standing alone at the dusty edge of the square, ignored by everyone, her eyes begging silently, and she had taken her hand without thinking, an instinct stronger than reason, and now that single choice had set the town ablaze. The child's voice cracked, fragile as glass. "Mommy, what do they want to do to me?" And Anna almost broke, almost told her the cruel truth, but instead she cupped her face and whispered fiercely, "They can't have you, not while I breathe," though she knew it was a vow made against an army of shadows. The chanting rose higher, torches pressing closer, the glow leaking through cracks in the barn walls like veins of fire, and suddenly, silence, complete, suffocating, as if the world itself held its breath, and then came the sound of a single bell tolling, deep, iron, echoing across the valley, and Anna saw the stranger flinch, his scar burning red in the torchlight, his jaw clenched in pain, and she realized he was bound to the same curse, once chosen, once branded, but unlike the girl he had, broken away, and that scar was his rebellion. He leaned in, his breath harsh. "If you run now, they'll catch you before the sun rises. But if you stand, if you choose to fight, the shadows will answer. You've seen them move, haven't you? They've been waiting for someone not afraid to defy the brand." And though fear strangled Anna, though her knees shook and her mouth felt full of ash, she remembered the moment she lifted the child's dress and saw the brand burned into her skin, the way the girl had begged, "Just kill me fast, Mommy, before they take me back." And Anna realized she could not, would not, ever hand her over, even if it meant her own death. The barn door rattled as hands slammed against it, the mob's voices rising again in a feverish roar. "Bring out the child! The blood must bind! Bring her out before the dawn!" And Anna held the girl closer, whispering through gritted teeth, "They'll have to go through me." And as she said it, the shadows thickened, wrapping around the walls like a cloak, and for the first time, Anna felt them not as fear, but as power, ancient and waiting, a choice that would either save them or consume them whole. The torches outside burned hotter, their flames licking the sky as though the mob had summoned not just fire, but fury itself. and Anna could hear the scrape of metal, the low growl of voices turning into snarls, beasts in human form demanding. The girl, demanding the blood, demanding an end to a cycle Anna still barely understood. But one thing was clear. She had stumbled into a nightmare older than the town itself, a pact written not on paper, but in flesh, in scars, in generations of silence. The child trembled in her arms, whispering words that broke Anna's chest open like glass. "If they take me, will you come with me? Please don't let me be alone again." And Anna pressed her lips to the girl's forehead, swearing without hesitation, "You'll never be alone, not while I breathe, not while I fight." Though the pounding at the barn door grew harder, splinters raining from the wood, and with every strike the stranger's eyes burned deeper, as if he already knew the choice Anna would have to make. And when he spoke, it was with the weight of prophecy. "There is no running, not anymore. The brand ties her to them, but it also ties her to you now. You claimed her the moment she called you mommy, and that bond is stronger than the mark if you dare to wield it. But it will demand everything, even your soul." And Anna's pulse hammered like a war drum, because though the idea of losing herself to some unseen power should have terrified her, it felt no different than what she had already decided. The moment she chose the girl, she had chosen death or damnation alongside her. The first hinge of the barn door snapped, the crowd shrieking in triumph as light poured through, and Anna pressed the child behind her, whispering, "Close your eyes, don't let go," before standing taller than she thought possible, her fear burning into something else, something hotter, sharper, as the shadows along the rafters slid down like black smoke alive, curling around her arms, wrapping her chest, seeping into her voice, until it came out not just hers but layered, ancient, echoing, "You want her? You'll bleed before you touch her." And for a single stunned heartbeat, the mob recoiled. The chanting faltered, the firelight bent as if afraid, and Anna realized the shadows had answered her vow. They had chosen her, because she had chosen the child, and in that realization, she felt both the terror of being consumed and the intoxicating strength of standing unbreakable. The stranger dropped to one knee, as though acknowledging what she had become, his voice hoarse with awe and warning. "Then fight, mother of the forsaken, but know this. Once you begin, the dawn will not end it. The brand will burn through. Blood through legacy, and every secret buried will claw its way into the light." And even as he spoke, the barn doors exploded inward, torches flooding the night with fire, faces twisted with hate, voices rising into one monstrous cry. "The child is ours." But Anna, no longer just Anna, lifted her hands cloaked in shadow and answered in a voice that shook the earth itself. "Not while she calls me mommy." And the battle for the girl's soul, for the truth of the town, for the price of love itself, began with a scream that tore the night in two. Under the collapsing roof of the barn, as the smoke thickened and firelight twisted the night into a nightmare painting, Anna felt the shadows coil inside her bones like living chains, whispering truths she had not wanted to know. That this mob outside, these snarling men and women with torches and blades, were not strangers, but descendants of the same bloodline that had once sold their children into darkness for safety, branding them like cattle, and now they sought to repeat the curse on the girl clinging to Anna's dress. She saw it in flashes. Memories that weren't hers seared across her mind, the crying of countless children, the chants of elders, the burning of flesh, and then silence bought with screams. And she knew at last why the girl had begged, "Kill me fast," because to live under that brand meant to live without a soul. But Anna was no saint, no warrior, no chosen vessel, just a bride no one had wanted, a woman discarded at the edge of town. And maybe that was why the shadows had answered her, because she had nothing left to lose but this one fragile bond she had sworn to protect. So when the mob surged forward, Anna let the darkness rise, pouring. through her hands like black fire, lashing the air with a hiss that made torches die in their holders, shadows swallowing flame. The mob faltered, but they pressed again, driven by fear and ritual, their voices cracking with madness. "Give us the girl. The brand belongs to us." And Anna stepped into their light, her eyes hollow pits rimmed with fire, her voice carrying like a blade. "The brand belongs to me now, and I will burn it out of her flesh with my own soul if I must." And at her words, the child whimpered, clutching her tighter, whispering so softly it was almost lost in the chaos. "Mommy, don't leave me." And that single word, that fragile plea, broke Anna in a way nothing else could. Not into weakness, but into fury so complete it stripped her fear away, and the shadows erupted from her like wings of night, sweeping over the mob, tearing torches apart, twisting their screams into silence as one by one they fell back, clawing at their eyes as if blinded by the very darkness they had once worshipped. The stranger in the corner, the man who had warned her, now stood transfixed, his blade half raised, but instead of striking, he lowered it. His expression caught between reverence and terror, whispering, "She is not cursed. She is chosen." And Anna realized too late that the power inside her was not only defending the girl, it was binding her to every forgotten child branded before. Voices of the forsaken rising like a storm in her chest, crying for justice, crying for release. The barn walls shook, the earth split, and the mob fled screaming into the night. But Anna could not stop, her body trembling as the shadows demanded more, begged her to finish the work, to cleanse the curse from the land with blood, with fire, with every soul guilty of silence. Yet as the darkness pushed, the child's tiny hand grabbed her chin, forcing her eyes down, and through all the chaos Anna saw nothing but innocence there, raw and unbranded, still in spirit, whispering, "Please don't go, Mommy. I just wanted a home." And in that moment Anna made the only choice left. She turned the shadows inward, dragging the screaming voices back into herself, consuming the curse, searing it into her veins instead of the girl's, and the pain was fire beyond fire, a scream that ripped her throat raw, but when the smoke cleared, the brand on the child's skin was gone, a raw scar fading to nothing, while Anna collapsed, to her knees, her breath ragged, her body shivering as though hollowed out. The stranger caught her before she hit the ground, his face pale, whispering, "You've taken it. You've taken the curse into yourself." But Anna barely heard, her eyes only on the girl, who crawled into her lap sobbing with relief, clinging to her as though nothing else existed. And with her last shred of strength, Anna stroked her hair, whispering, "You're free now. You're safe," though she knew in her bones she would never be free. The shadows coiled inside her forever, a price paid in silence, and as dawn broke over the horizon, the mob scattered to dust, their whispers dying with the night, leaving only the barn in ruins, the stranger staring in awe, and a child safe in the arms of the woman no one had wanted, except for the one soul who needed her most, and that was enough to make even damnation feel like salvation.